Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hey, Justin, thanks so much.
Yeah, I love that we met only back in April. You attended my event out of nowhere because your friend Angela was attending, and she's like, "You need to come to this." And I
hmm
feel like our lives have been so intertwined since then. I came to your Thrive Hive event in June, and then you're coming to Elevate in January, and we get to chat and do life together. And we won't dive into what we were talking about, but we got to know each other even more before we even hit record. And I'm just so grateful that we met, and thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited to dive into your journey because I think it's fascinating. But where I want to start is who is
Thanks.
Michelle today? And then we'll break down how you got there.
I love it. So, Michelle today is a renewed version. I would say, like, in my greatest truth, like, I feel like I've created a new chapter in my life. She's somebody who is actually excited about writing chapters rather than the whole freaking journey, right? I
Mm,
think that in my 20s, I came out and I just was like, yes, I've got it. I had this whole sense of like adulting and financial maturity, and I'm going to move out at 19 years old and went through this whole entire like messy, messy part, right? And then I end up in like a level of success and then in a messy middle with a divorce. But the woman today is somebody who's feeling really excited about these years and the fact that one, I'm an empty nester. I'm a grandparent today to two beautiful grandchildren. I'm remarried to somebody who is like completely in alignment with my soul purpose and like, just fun to do this life with. And I think I'm in the greatest space of exploration around impact, purpose, still learning, still evolving. And I think the thing that's the funnest part for me is that I don't feel like I have to have it all figured out. I think early on, we're trying to figure it out. We're hustling to figure it out. We're like trying to keep up with the Joneses, all those things. And it's like, I remember my mom saying, when you hit 50, and Oprah said the same thing, when you hit 50, you're going to love it. And I just was like, oh God, like I was in my 40s at the time. And I thought that's so old. And I also lost my dad at 54. He was
mm.
54 years old. I was 30. And so I thought, I don't know how I'm going to feel about 50s, but I will say there's something so like evolutionary about being at a stage of your life where you can up and move quickly. Like we relocated 4 years ago and I had Naples on my vision board in four places, and here we are living in like what was my paradise dream. And yet 4 months ago, I was like, let's put the house that we just built 2 years ago on the market and move closer to the beach because the thing that we had built felt disaligned, not from a home perspective, because, but I also realized home is different. So I just feel like the Michelle today is somebody who is living life a little bit more adventurously, and able to do that without having to make like a ton of decisions that have to be unpacked because I've kept things minimal and I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
I love it. And isn't it funny how in our 20s and 30s we feel like we have everything figured out, right? Like we know every answer, we have it all figured out, like everything is perfect. And then you hit a moment in life, and whether that's a moment of distress or a realization that happened, it could be a divorce, it could be losing a parent. For me, it was losing my mom when I was 31. All these things, and so like you then start to question everything. And then that becomes the beauty of the journey. Like you said, I'm interested in the chapter, not the entire thing. What does that look
Yeah.
like for you, focusing on one chapter at a time versus being so worried and stressed about what the big picture is?
I feel like it provides so much freedom because we're less worried about it not working out and more in the energy of, I mean, I've always been a what if positive, not a what if negative. For the time that I ended up buying the company that I worked for right before I turned 30, and everybody was like, you have no business doing that. I mean, honestly, like I really didn't have any business doing that. It was like over $1 million purchase. I
Wow.
literally had just pulled myself out of like debt from my like early 20s, like that no one had credit card debt and payday loans. I did. And I feel like, for me, it it's allowed me when I say freedom, it's this freedom of just remembering like I may only have so many more at bats, right? Like I don't know how many more at bats I have. So I feel like I'm more of a risk taker. Now, make no mistake, I'm still a calculated risk taker, right? But But even in my 30s, I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen? If I fail, I'll just go flip burgers. I've always had a great work ethic. I've always led with humility. And so if I can lead with work ethic and humility, then I could probably get through anything. And so I feel like what it's done for me is I don't want to say that it's like easy, because this chapter isn't necessarily easy. I'm still figuring out what that next thing is and rebuilding. And my husband opened up a boxing gym in October, and we're trying to cash flow that. And like, there's still things that happen, right? And our children we have a blended family, all adult kids, they're going through things. Um, and blessed that I'm not in the aging parent stage yet, right? And maybe I won't get there, God willing. But I feel like there's this element of what even more light on the what if positives, like take the shot, Michelle, because what's the worst thing that happens if you don't hit it out of the park? You just choose something different, and life is pretty streamlined where I can not unpack everything. And maybe that just comes with working from home and having a remote team and a little more freedom to work where I want and travel where I want. And to me, I think that has provided a lot of the freedom that I have today, the ability to like make decisions. And I know you have that lifestyle too, right? Like I'm building this chapter very differently than the one that I built over the first 27 years. I built the freaking monster, right? I built the monster that I was working 80 hours a week and had 22 employees and chasing all of the metrics and whatnot. And I just feel like I just don't want to, I don't want to do that anymore. I
Yeah.
want to still have financial success and freedom, and I want overflow to be able to bless other people, right? That is absolutely part of my makeup. But if I can lead with humility and lead with work ethic, I feel like that's the freedom that I have today.
Yeah, and I think it's the testament to it doesn't have like entrepreneurship doesn't have to look a specific way, right? It can literally look however you want it to look. And I'm not saying there aren't moments of craziness still, right? Like you travel all the time. Like that's the one thing I've noticed since meeting you is like you're always going to different events and networking and building relationships and doing all these types of things. And I think that's beautiful. But at the same time, like I also had that era of working 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day and
Mhm.
feeling like if I didn't do that, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do as an entrepreneur. And then I had that aha moment of like, oh wait, I literally built my own cage. Like I built
Mhm.
this cage that I'm now stuck in, and I have to figure out how to kind of maneuver. And that's what, and you exited your cage in a very fruitful way, and that's beautiful. And now you get
Yeah.
to design your life. Talk a little bit about that era of your life of putting in all the hours, having the 22 employees, and then why the decision to exit that? Because a lot of people are afraid to exit.
Yeah. So that chapter for me was beautiful and messy all at the same time, right? So I owned an insurance agency. Nobody wakes up and says, "I think I want to be an insurance agent," ever. I started in financial services, and then I made a decision early on. I had my stockbroker's license in my early 20s. As I said, I was like already making all the financial mistakes. And I think what's so interesting is today, what I get to teach is like if somebody who's in financial services can be in an avoidant mindset, like people that are doing this journey of entrepreneurship, like you're not alone, right? Because it's not about whether you're smart or whether you're capable. It's like, are you in financial avoidance? And so for me, the chapter of building my property and casualty agency was really a fun one because I loved entrepreneurship. For me, insurance was just the vessel that I connected with entrepreneurs. I did all business insurance. So, 600 manufacturing plants, 300 restaurants, 300 general contractors. Like I didn't niche one thing because I loved the journey and the story of the entrepreneur. How did they get there? What were they trying to achieve? All of those things. And the truth is, like, I had no idea that I was a workaholic. I had no idea what high performance meant, right? Like a high performance, achiever, whatever. But the truth is, I did know because in my 20s, my entire makeup was I'll show you.
Mm.
I'll show you that the girl that came from nothing, I'll show you that the kid that had powdered milk and no vacations, like, I'll show you that I can break the gap. And the truth is nobody cared. I spent my entire like first decade, like from 20s to 30s, literally like proving something. And I remember like buying the company literally right before I turned 30. It was like 2 weeks before I turned 30, which was a goal, have a house by 25, a business by 30. And even though I didn't know what that looked like, and I had been listening to Tony Robbins for years, right? Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, every cassette tape, whatever, And then I realized after I hit that milestone, and I hit multiple milestones, and I was like, why am I not feeling happy? How come nobody cares? Right? Like, I'm like, does anybody care? No. What they cared about was whether I was going to fail. They cared about whether or not the decision that I made was actually going to backlash on me and I was going to have egg on my face. Like, that's what people cared about, much what
Yeah.
you see today in social media. People love to judge through social media, but the truth was I had to wrestle with the fact in my 30s, like, okay, why am I not feeling fulfilled? I've done this thing and now I'm growing this thing. And I had a lot of aspirations around being the best and, growing every year. And I had this unhealthy relationship with the metrics, unhealthy relationships with like winning, 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 winning. And at the same time, though, when I started to lean into why I didn't feel good, why it didn't make me feel happy, I started doing the work, the spiritual work, and I started listening to Wayne Dyer, right? And I started finding his work and immersing myself in more of a like, if that isn't it, then if it isn't the hustle culture sales camp of Tony Robbins, which was funny because he transitioned at the same time that I started seeking out why am I not feeling fulfilled. He went in that direction as well. And he started getting to neuroscience and NLP and all of that. Well, I was listening to Wayne Dyer. I started doing the work around like, who am I outside of what I do? And so I would say from 30 to 40, I was on a parallel path. It was like, I really was able to do both. Yet, what I was noticing is that I was seeing that I had built the monster. I was seeing that it was affecting my health. I was seeing that my family was getting crumbs. There was still that I'm playing wiffle ball with my kid in the yard. And then I'm like, okay, it's been 10 minutes, get back on my laptop and do something, right? And act like I just played with my kid. And the truth was, it was like they were getting crumbs all the time. And I think for me, and I open up the path to profits with this. It's one of the opening chapters. I literally, as I was recording, it was crying. I had to like stop because it was so real to go back to that core memory of when I realized that it wasn't supposed to be this way, or that I had a decision. It didn't have to be this way. And the truth is, I think so many entrepreneurs find themselves on that dark road of despair. They find themselves, they're overweight, they're unhealthy. I was having health issues, right? Like not panic attacks, but thinking I was having like a heart attack. And it was just like stress. It was stress.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, Jason, the number one cause of death for agency principals that own insurance agencies is massive heart attack.
Well,
Massive heart attack. And by 50. And I was like 45. And I'm like, is this my demise? Is this going to be it? And I just also remember looking on the sidelines, like I was the person that was getting to the game last, stuck in traffic, trying to pay attention, but I'm not. I'm on my phone. This is when phones had just come out. And I'm like, just thinking, boy, that person on the sidelines is coaching their kids' game. They have a business. This doesn't look like that for them. So it wasn't what I was telling myself, which was, well, of course you can't figure out your ideal work day, your ideal weekend, your ideal work morning because you're a freaking entrepreneur. But the truth was I was witnessing other entrepreneurs doing it differently than me. I had to step back and make a decision. And that's really what happened. I got to the point where it's like, if I had to dream, I actually hired a life coach, Deb Miller. And I had never had a life coach. I always had business consultants and advisors like help me grow, help me see what I don't see, always in masterminds, ran masterminds. And here I was with this life coach, this beautiful soul who was softer, who was in feminine energy, not in masculine energy. And she gave me homework that I couldn't even do. Like, what's your ideal work day? Which I was like, ideal? I'm a freaking entrepreneur. There is no ideal. There's fires every
yeah,
day.
running around putting
And
fires out.
yeah, but you know what happens when you get there? I think the good news was for me is that it's never too late to actually create alignment. Alignment just requires two things, a new vision and goals. And I had lost sight of like what was the vision? If I did stop and I dreamed up what it would look like. The sad thing is I couldn't even figure it out. And the one thing that I came up with was this is very sad. I'm like, I won't be yelling at my son on the way out the door every morning because if we don't get out the door by this minute, we're behind that bus, which then makes me late to get him to school and late for the 30-minute ride to get into my office for that first meeting. And for me, the vision was just not yelling at my kid on the way out the door in the morning if we got, if we were a minute late. And I had to start unpacking what it would look like if I actually discovered something different for myself. And the truth is, I felt like I had a business partner for 17 and a half years. We had a great relationship, like partnership. And I thought, I don't want another divorce.
Hmm.
And I was like, it's my business. I can go to my business partner and say, let's change this or that. And the truth was, I made a decision before I went and said that I was the one that wanted to change the scenario. And so it was a truthful conversation about, I want to simplify my life and spend more time with my kids. That became my mantra. When people were like, what are you going to do? I'm going to simplify my life and spend more time with my kids. And at that time, they were 9 and 15. And they were like, oh God, you're going to be way too much mom. Literally, they were like, you're going to be way too much mom. If we're all you have, they were scared.
Yeah.
But it was a deciding factor. It was like, can I create something different?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting how many conversations I've had or people I've witnessed create the external success and then go, "Whoa, like this is not what I thought it was. I thought this was going to answer all of those questions. I thought all of a sudden then I was going to be happy and then I was going to love myself more and then I was going to, like you said, prove them wrong." I had a big prove them wrong chip on my shoulder too
Mm,
because I didn't go to college. I was a bad student in high school, like all those types of things. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll show you," right? And then got
mhm.
the external, and then I was like, oh no, wait, this is supposed to be an internal journey. So what did that look
Yes.
like for you? I know you said you hired a life coach, you started listening to Wayne Dyer, but what was that journey for you? Because it's scary sometimes to go inward when you're
Mhm.
so externally focused for so long.
Yeah, I think that for me, I was super blessed because I was able to take an exit, right? A lot of people don't find themselves there. So many times they can't dream bigger or if because they don't know where their next mortgage payment is coming from. They've built the business and it hasn't maximized revenue and all those things and they can't feel abundant or financially free if they can't meet basic needs and actually like make a new decision. And that might be in a marriage that isn't working. Like there's multiple versions of that story. But for me, I think one, I took a year off. I took a sabbatical. And what's so interesting is people were calling me and we didn't announce that I had like taken an exit or retired. Like we didn't want customers running away from the agency and whatnot. So it was very quiet. So I also didn't get to celebrate, by the way. I didn't get to
Mm,
celebrate the 29-year-old who made that 7-figure purchase happen and who had no business doing it, believe it or not, until about 4 months ago when I
wow.
realized that I never celebrated the exit. I never gave honor to her for taking the risk. But for me, I remember I opened up my calendar January 1 and there was nothing on it. And the snow was coming down, and I didn't have to worry about whether employees were getting there and how many insurance claims we were going to have and all the thing. And I was like, wow, snow's really beautiful. I hated snow. And I remember people were like, hey, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to take 12 weeks off. That was my answer. As a high performer, I was like, I'm going to take 12 weeks off and figure it out. And then I realized as I softened into, wait a minute, why are you calling this 12 weeks? Like, what makes you think 12 weeks is like whatever? And on the 11th week, people were calling me, what are you doing? What are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to take a year off. And it was such discomfort because when you wake up and you have no identity, like I didn't even know how to be a mom. My former husband
Yeah.
was home with the kids the last 6 years of our marriage. He managed their schedules until we got divorced. And so I was like, I don't even know how to be a mom. And then I have kids that are like, oh, you're going to be too much mom. So I'm like, okay, don't be too much mom. They won't like you, right? Like you won't have a good relationship with them. And so I was just in this complete identity crisis. And I think, Jerome Myers is a friend of mine. He helps founders with post exit, figuring out what it is they want to create, who their identity is. And I think I didn't have anybody to walk with me through that. Actually, I think I was done with Deb Miller as soon as I like took the step into this new chapter. But I did do a lot of journaling. I did a lot of yoga. I did a lot of praying. And I just kept, I think one of my biggest prayers was asking, where would you have me go? Course of Miracles. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? And with whom? And I just stayed open. And what God kept showing me is that I was always inspired, even through my 20s, because like you, I went to community college, right? I mean, like, I was like, oh, don't ask me where I went to college. It was like Three Rivers Community College. I had such shame around it. And yet I always told myself that if and when I had the space, I would go back and teach money and marketing. And be able to come alongside of people, because here's the truth, like people in their 30s and 40s and the entrepreneurs that I served over that time, we grew the agency to over 5,000 customers. I saw so many of them fail and be on that failed pointing, the failed business statistic, 66% fail in the first 5 years. And I kept hearing that was my mission. My mission is to actually help change the failed business statistic, which feels so big, but it literally has never changed. There's like 39 million entrepreneurs today in the world. COVID activated even more. And like the number still is 66% fail.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like that quiet time gave rise to me just in a discovery space of figuring out like where would you have me go, what, and it has not been a clear path. Like behind me you see I wrote the path, I wrote prosperity after divorce, take charge of your finances and recreate the life you really want. And I thought my calling was to work in the divorce space, right? I had my financial services license, I went and got my CDFA to be a forensic, go through the forensic part of divorce, just to be able to grab people at the bottom of the courthouse steps because they were coming and finding me. I put up a shingle called Sick of the Hustle Financial Coaching. So my first iteration of this business is Sick of the Hustle Financial Coaching.
I
Okay.
love it.
So yeah, and but what happened was I was not niching any market, but divorce people kept showing up, and they were showing up 3 and 5 years post divorce. And of course, in my solution based thinking, I'm like, well, if I can get to them sooner, I can stop some of this pain. I also feel that's part of my mission is to stop financial pain and pull people out of financial avoidance, right? There's 3 things that happen when we put our head in the sand and we're in financial avoidance. There's misaligned spending, there's missed opportunities that come up that you can't say yes to, and then there's this huge sense of living a financial imposter syndrome, right? There's a lack of financial stability, a lack of financial scarcity and instability. And I just believe that in this chapter, that is my mission, is to help entrepreneurs and other people figure out how to come out of financial avoidance and get the education. Because unless you're in alternative school, right, you didn't take personal finance, right? You took calculus, statistics, and everything else. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I love it. And so obviously then you, like you mentioned, you wrote The Path to Profits. That was what, 2023?
yeah, 2023. The audiobook came out in 2024. And it's so interesting because I feel like, what I've done with that work, it was actually my Envision event that I ran for 7 years in a row. And I realized it was a 3-day process, a framework that I brought entrepreneurs through. Vision first. If you aren't clear about what it is you want, right? It's about creating the life by design and then aligning the business to that. And I think so many people just leap with passion and they want to start a business, but they haven't figured out their personal core values. That's with me, right? And their personal core values. And I think when you define your vision first and then set goals and then go where aligned opportunities actually will lead you, then the business that you're building feels aligned. And I think that the framework of the path to profits is one, figure out the vision and the goals, then the flow pillar, which is all about the money and personal finance and business. So, right, so it's the bridge, the framework around your business and personal finances, where like profit first is like a business focused finance. No, this is the bridge because you can't be an entrepreneur and not realize that they're married, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's frameworks around the money on both sides. And then the grow pillar is about how do you close the gap if you're not where you want to be and you've got debt to pay off, and also strategic alliances, like being able to create relationships and do business differently than what we did in our 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you focus on relationship building because that's a huge thing
Mm-hmm.
for me. That's the book. It's the 5 people you need in your life and talking about the importance of all that. And I've said this on the show multiple times, but back in 2022, I got rid of all my websites because I was so caught up in like the funnel and why are they stopping on the second step of the funnel
Oh,
and constant brain noise, right? So even when I wasn't working, my brain was working. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing it this way anymore. And I shut everything down. I was like, let's see what happens. And I made more money that year than I'd ever made before. And it was based off of pure relationship building over the previous 8+ years. I sold
mm-hmm.
out a retreat with one Instagram story. There was no funnel. There was no nothing. And so why is relationship building so important to you? And what do you look for in a good relationship? Not a partnership, not a even particularly a strategic thing, but what type of people do you like to attract into your life?
I love that. So I think that relationship building is super important. And like you, I think when I look at this iteration of this business that I've blown up now, like two or three times already. It always when things are working for me and I'm in alignment, it is always because of relationships. And I don't take them lightly. I think that, I remember reading Keith Ferrazzi's book in my 30s when I was like the person you would not want to talk to at the chamber meeting or in a room, like flipping out the business cards, bump and roll, all the things that I was taught in sales. And I was just like, this is so icky. Like, I don't even like me. And I remember reading Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Eat Alone, and it was about the relationship building, right? And actually, Vince Pugliese, who I know we both know, one of my favorite books is his book, The Wealth of Connection.
Yeah.
And the hour of giving, where you simply just stay connected with people with no agenda other than, hey, how are you doing? And I've adopted that. I don't do an hour, I do 30 minutes. This is an hour, but it's made such a difference. But I think for me, relationship building is key to growth. Like we shouldn't be doing it alone. And you want to shorten your timeline and collapse time. Relationships do that. Introductions do that. I think that it has to be reciprocal, right? Like you can a strategic partnership or relationship. If it's a business relationship, both people have to win. It can't be like, one person is giving and the other person is just taking. It's like you got to figure out, is there a space where you can make introductions? Are you serving the same market? Not in the same way, but like, can you help each other by whatever it may be? Like, you run a podcast, I may have great guests that should be on your show, and I'm serving them and you and your audience by making an introduction, whether I landed on your podcast or not today, right? So for me, I think that, relationship building allows us to go further faster, and it's also so much more fun. Like, so much more fun.
Yeah.
I was just out filming in Scottsdale, and I happened to be in the studio with Chris Lee, who is the booking agent to Jim Quick and, a bunch of different people. And I was listening. I gave him my spot because he had to catch a flight. And I'm like, I'll film after you, whatever. And I was listening, and we had never met before. And I was listening to his answers. And I was literally thinking to myself about Michael King, who I met at your event. And I was like, I'm texting Michael. I'm so glad I had his number. Do you have an agent? And he's like, and I hope we can tell this story and go back and listen to his podcast one day. But I was like, I've got to make this introduction. And I left and I asked Chris for his information. I said, I have somebody you need to meet. And I literally made that introduction. He's like, here's how you make the introduction. And they have a meeting. Like, there's something magical about being a connector and being open to not needing something from anybody, but also knowing that as your circle grows, that the people that you're meant to meet for whatever reason, that's the fun part, to go back a year or two from now and be like, see the synchronicities. And I think that for me, what doesn't work is you can feel energy.
Yeah.
I can feel somebody's take energy. I can feel it. But I also do the breath work. I do the meditative work to invite in, one, to open up my own vessel so that when I come in a room, I feel like a light. And then like attracts like, right?
Hmm.
So I usually repel the people that are takers, thankfully. And if they come at me, I usually can feel it pretty clearly. But I think that's just getting in tune as well. I know it's a little woo, but it's getting in tune with your own vessel and like how you want to show up. Right. And I think
Yep.
that for me, it's really important before I go in a room, before I go on a stage, I'm obviously like bringing that same energy in. Like, it's not about me, it's about them. And I've had to practice those tools, and I continue to practice those tools on the daily.
Yeah. And by the way, we love Woo on the Growth Now movement. So you're good to go anywhere you want with that. But it is so true. And you and I are very much a similar person, right? Like, I live with the rule of give more than you receive.
Yeah.
And so if I approach somebody and I meet them and I start talking to them and I know that they are a take person more than they are a giver, I'm like, this isn't a relationship that's going to work
Mm-mm.
from that standpoint, because I know how it's going to end, right? And I can
Yes.
say this: there have been more people on as a guest on my show who have said to me, "Hey, I know people that need to be on your show," than who have said to me, "I should be on your show," or "I want to be on your show." Right, right. So like, it's a fascinating thing when you can give first, and then there at some point becomes that reciprocal type of
Reciprocal.
thing,
Hmm.
and it's such a beautiful thing, and people just don't. People miss the mark so often, especially in the beginning when they're broke and when they're all that stuff. And I think naturally I've always been like a, hey, how can I support you? What type of thing,
Mhm.
even when I was in that broke state. But if you can get there when you're broke, you're going to grow a heck of a lot faster. And it's because of the relationships, right? And how powerful to
Yes.
be a connector, and say, hey, Chris Lee needs to know Michael King. Let me make that introduction. I'm getting to a point here. And the only reason that you were able to make that happen is because you show up to rooms and you give as much as you possibly can and you build those relationships. So how important is it to you to get into rooms, to make those connections? And because I mean, I see you on the go all the time, right? Like you're constantly in rooms. Why is that such a priority for you?
One, I don't take it lightly that I've been invited into rooms, right? I think that, a lot of people are like, yeah, she's in the room, she's in the room. And I'm like, there's something beautiful about the invitation into a room, right? And so the invitation to come to your event when I didn't know who you were, like literally the first night at the meet and greet, I'm like, who is this Justin Schenck guy? I listened to your podcast like on the plane, right? But there's this element of trust that happens when you are in rooms, right? If you're in a trust room, if you're in the right room, then you start to have this aligned energy around where the next room might be, right? Maybe that's a room that you're hosting, and now you're inviting other people in, and there's a trust that's been built, so they're inviting people in. Like you came to the Hive, and now you've shared out and endorsed, like, oh yeah, the Thrive Hive is a place you could come, and I feel the same way about your event. Like I think everybody should be there, and so I think that for me, the energy of being in the room, one, is super fun for me. Like at this stage of the game, I want to travel and see new things, right? And it's funny because I used to always be like, I've got to go travel outside of the country. And since COVID, I've been like, there's a whole lot of places in this country that I haven't seen. And so I love when I find relationships that draw me into a room or an event and it's in a place that I haven't been. It's like a hell yes for me. And then also a lot of rooms I'm invited into, like I'll be speaking in LA. I'm going back to LA again next weekend. But the invitation is I'm always open when there are relationships built. How can I be useful and helpful to your community? And I think that just being able to know that I'm in a stage of my life where that matters to me, like, can I be useful and helpful to your community? Whatever that looks like, let's have a conversation, has opened up rooms. And then there's a reciprocal, hey, I think you can be useful and helpful in my community. Right. And so for me, that's the spice of life. Like we get to play in this field and grow together, but do it from a relational standpoint instead of it just being transactional. And I think for me, that's what being in rooms does. And yeah, I feel like this year God's called me into a lot of rooms, and I'm just like, oh, but I also think, honestly, Justin, like I can feel it from the core since November or December. Like it is like a lot of rooms are opening up for me. A lot of new relationships and introductions are happening because the time is now for the
Hmm.
path to profits. The time is now. People need it right now. They need frameworks around their money, they need the education. And I'm like, I think everything that's been happening up until now has been preparing me for the relationships and the introductions that were going to happen because the time is now that every entrepreneur needs to read the path to profits and understand that they can learn the frameworks around their personal and business finances and pull themselves out of financial avoidance and actually build businesses that they don't need a vacation from and be financially stable.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And it's funny, I got invited to Book Thinkers where you were, and I couldn't go because I was on vacation. And it was one of those things and it was one of the speakers there, Zach Hesterberg, who invited me. He's like, dude, I got tickets, come hang out. I was like, I can't, right? And then I'm noticing these rooms you're in. I'm like, oh yeah, you're gonna hang out with them again in January at Elevate. Like it's so funny how these
Great.
circles just overlap and intertwine and all these types of different things. And my favorite thing, because first I'll say this: I think anybody who runs events is crazy, including myself. Like
Yeah.
it is so much work. It is such a risk and a gamble of like, hey, I'm putting all
Yeah.
this money into this thing. I hope people show up. Like I don't know what's going on. Um, but like there's something special about putting a room together and then you watching people in that room making connections,
Mhm.
collaborating, doing all these things. So I imagine you feel the same way. What does it feel like
Yeah.
to you when you bring people together and then all of a sudden you see magic happening and you go, you know what? I had a small part in that. What's that feel like to you?
It's the best feeling in the world. It's the best feeling in the world to be to host an incubator where positivity is happening, where you say magic, I say magic. I'm like, it's magical. And specifically because when I host the Thrive Hives, right, it's where we discuss the stings and the sweetness of entrepreneurship. But what's so beautiful, and I had this realization after you were just in the June Hive, like the cross pollination that's happening, bees go and pollinate, and I'm like, I'm watching millions of dollars of business pass and strategic alliances happen, businesses being built with people that have come through. And so it's magical for me. I think what's so beautiful, there's also a responsibility around it. What's so cool for me about hosting events like Envision, there'll be year 9 this year. And then the Thrive Hives, which I'm going on year 4, but it's like, there's this sense of I have very specific rules, right? I'm a rule breaker, but I also love stability around experiences that I create because my reputation, my character is on the line. And my rules are this: no ego, no judgment of self or others, no pitching because no one freaking wants it. And then honestly, it's also for me, it's coming in and being vulnerable and no hierarchy. I think that's the biggest differentiator between a Thrive Hive is people are like, I don't know what's so different here. Well, what's different is I don't announce the speakers and the people that are experts that are going to contribute to that hive, because if I do, everyone wants to be talking to them. And I also don't let people speak and run. It's like, unless there's an emergency, like you got to be in it. You're still growing. Because I'm not looking for the entrepreneur that's hit a certain level of business and they aren't still growing something, right? And
Yeah.
so whether that's impact, purpose, a new business, whatever, equity in somebody else's business, I don't care. But you've got to have this sense of still growing. And so for me, all of those intersections actually create the room that I want. And so it does feel magical to know that you have all of those things in play. No pitching, no egos, no whatever. And then you watch what happens. The trust room is actually what creates the output. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and you put together such an incredible room, and I highly encourage anybody listening to check out a Thrive Hive and go get in that room if you're able. It's funny because I spoke at it, and so when I walk in the room, I looked around, I was like, okay, trying to figure out who the speakers are, and I realized
Hmm.
every single person there could have been a speaker, like
Yep.
any of them, and they all would have blown it out of the water, right? So it's a high level room of people. I thought for sure I might mess up his name, Dr. Sean.
Yeah, Sean Dill. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought for sure he was speaking, and
Hmm.
I was, I sat next to him, and I sat next to Jody, your husband, and and I got to really connect and make great relationships with these people. I'm getting on a call randomly with Lenny next week because he texted me. He's like, "Yo, any good cigars lately?" And so like you build those relationships and
Yeah.
continue to kind of nurture them, and that's what I love about why I'm doing Elevate. Right, tickets are
Hmm.
open to anybody with the summit, but Elevate's an invite only room. I want to make sure it's curated. I want to make sure that everybody's operating at a high level in all
Yep.
areas of their life, not just their business. And I think it's important to be able to curate those rooms and see what happens next. And so I
Yeah.
want to ask you a question I ask every single person on this show. It is a two-part question. The first one is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
So my 3 things for success: doing what I want, when I want, and with whom I want.
That's,
That is
by the way, that's my
clearly my
definition as
that
well.
is clearly my definition of success. Nobody's going to tell me what to freaking do, which means I'm pretty much unemployable unless I'm creating it for myself, right? I'm sure you're in that camp as well. And then the
Yes.
3 things that I do every day to ensure that success.
Yep.
Okay, so one, I wake up every day and I have 2 prayers as soon as I wake up: thank you and use me. And so I just think that's a very intentional way to wake up and live my day, right? Like winning the day for me is, did I have gratitude, right? So for me, success is gratitude first, humility second, and then third is I work at it. Like I don't just expect that I'm going to get up and all these things are going to happen for me and to me. um, it does require some active action, right? And so those are the 3 things for me. It's intention, it's gratitude, and then it's execution.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said the execution part. Like I have a three-step process to overcome limiting beliefs, and the last thing is do the work, right? Because nothing works
Yeah.
unless you do. And the reality is, like, I think, I loved The Secret when it came out, but I think it made a lot of people think like, oh, all I got to do is dream about it, and it's just going to show up.
Hmm.
The story that
Yeah.
sticks out, and by the way, I've had a number of those people on my show as guests. One of them was a client of mine for a while, but like, it's one of those things where like you're missing the last piece. You're missing the last piece where they have to put in that step. There's one of the stories in The Secret was something like I needed $10,000, and the next day I went to my mailbox and there was a $10,000 check in there, and I was like, well, you can't just be promising that stuff. So I'm so glad you mentioned put in the work.
Hmm.
I love that. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question. But before we get there, how can people get into Thrive Hive? How can they connect with you? How can they grab your book? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me all over social media, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, all the places, even on Substack now, by the way,
Nice.
and under Michelle Jacobik, or on Substack and LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that I put out weekly called The Path to Profit. So what I love so much about the book is you can get it anywhere, right? If you're a reader and you love to highlight, there are exercises at the end of every chapter to actually move you through the process of the path to profit so you can DIY it without necessarily having to come to like the Envision event every year. But it's also, if you're a Spotify subscriber, if you go over to the third tab, it's not just music and podcasts. There is a thing for audiobooks, and it's free if you have a premium subscription. Audible, we all know that everybody has Audible credits that have an Audible subscription. They probably have 10 credits. Go download the book, right? I actually feel like listening to the book before you actually buy the paperback or like, the hardcover is better because you're listening from that lens of, does this resonate with me? And then when it does, and you get through the book, now you get the exercises and move yourself through the process. But the Thrive Hives, I have my next one coming up the third weekend in October. We keep them to 25 people so that you do get to actually meet everybody in the room. We do lunch and dinners together. So go to michellejacobik.com. You'll see a tab that says how you can work with me one-on-one through the financial pieces, CEO to CEO, advisory, and then also information about events and the Thrive Hives.
Love it. And I can't say enough about the Thrive Hive. I thought it was incredible. I'm a hard judge on events because when you put together events, you pay attention to all the little things and you just knocked that out of the park. So
Thank
highly
you.
encourage people to check it out for sure. And like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
I would definitely say this reinvention chapter, this brave step to dismantle everything that felt like stability for me and recreate something new. And the growth really is where I learned self trust.
Mm,
I've always had faith, right? I have a deep faith for the path, the journey, trusting that, I'll always be in light if I take the steps that I'm meant to take. But we all know that we get off path. But there is the biggest growth that I've had in this last 14 years. I can't believe it's been 14 years since my exit, has been this element of self trust. I can trust myself.
I love it. Michelle, thank you so
Mm,
much for coming on the show and sharing your journey with my audience. But more importantly, thank you so much for your friendship and your support and everything in this short amount of time that we've known each other. I feel like we've known each other for a decade, but thank you so
I think
much.
we have. Thank you, Justin. So good.